Welcome to Tybee Island Disc Golf. Join me in my meditations on Psalm 141 as I play some disc golf and seek to glorify the Lord for His Word, for His world, for His Redeemer. Psalm 141 is another Psalm of David, and in many ways it feels like a complement to Psalm 140. In familiar ways, we see David cry out, asking for the Lord to listen to him, to hear him, and to receive his prayers and his lifted hands as sacrifices and incense. There's a beautiful new covenant flavor to David's request, as we're no longer asked to bring incense and sacrifices of bulls and goats, but rather our prayers and our adoration to God in worship. In verse 3, it feels like David is applying the lessons he learned about his study of the wicked in chapter 140, when he says, "Let not my words, my mouth, open to evil." He asks the Lord to help him to speak truth, to guard his lips, and to keep his heart from seeking that which is evil. He wants nothing to do with the company of these evil men and their delicacies. And he knows that in order to avoid this temptation, he needs the Lord's help. He adds to this that he's open to the rebuke of a righteous man, that this is a kindness to help him stay on the path of righteousness. You can see David embracing in many ways, in a small, shadowy form, the fulfillment that we saw in Matthew 18 of church discipline, in which brothers and sisters in Christ would rebuke us and call us back to faithfulness, which is the very thing we need. And yet, even so, David recognizes that evil deeds done and wicked judges must come to judgment. For David is the righteous man whose rebuke is oil upon the head, and his words are pleasant in the day of judgment. I hope you're following along in the text, because when we get to verse 7, I don't really know what this means in its context, but I'm encouraged to see the translator's footnote to suggest that the meaning of the Hebrew text is also uncertain. In verse 8, we hear another familiar refrain when David says, "My eyes are to you, O Lord." His attention is turned back upward to the living God. He asks that the Lord might defend and keep him, and that he might also keep him from evildoers. He asks that the Lord would keep him from the traps and snares of the wicked that we saw back in chapter 140, and that instead they would fall into their own traps, all while the Lord allows him to pass by safely. In this psalm, we see David showing us what it's like to live in obedience to the Father, asking for the Lord's help in putting our own evil and wickedness and evil tongues to death. But we see something more profound than that. Let's see if it's stuck. There it is. Opto-X Keystone. Put it in the basket. For the words of Christ were heard on our behalf. The Father heeded all his pleas for mercy. His prayers were as incense. And when his hands were lifted up upon that cross, his praise was received as the sacrifice that was required for our sin. The words of Christ were always good and righteous. His heart never inclined toward evil. He was kept perfect by faith in the living God. By his perfect life of obedience as a man, He became a perfectly suited sacrifice for the redemption of man. Christ is the righteous deliverer of kind rebukes, and the one who would have oil poured over his head if he would listen and obey. And at Christ's return, his words shall be pleasant, when he overthrows wicked judges and scatters the bones of the evil about the mouth of Sheol. And it is Christ who will keep us to the very end. He does, in fact, keep us from the snares and traps of the evil one. So let us rejoice in Christ today, for he has fulfilled the promise set forth by David in Psalm 141. Let's meditate on his word, that the Lord might keep us from wicked words, and rather let our rebukes be as light and life for those who hear us, oil poured over the head. Let's enjoy the world he's made, and I hope you'll consider joining me next time.